The transport ship slowly moved through space toward the massive space station floating in the darkness. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez pressed her face against the small window and watched as the Zephyrian Institute of Advanced Sciences grew larger and larger. The station was enormous, bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth. It looked like a giant metal flower with dozens of arms, reaching out in all directions. Bright lights moved along its surface like tiny stars. Amanda felt her stomach twist with nervousness. She was the first human scientist ever invited to work at the Institute. The letter had arrived 6 months ago, written in perfect English by someone she had never met. The Zephyrian Council wanted to learn about human biology and had chosen her to be their teacher. It was the chance of a lifetime. "Mom, look at that." 8-year-old Katie Rodriguez pointed at the window with excitement. Her blonde hair bounced as she moved her head to get a better view. "It's like a city in space." Amanda smiled at her daughter. Bringing Katie had not been part of the original plan. But when her ex-husband had disappeared 3 months ago, she had no choice. Katie would have to live with her at the Institute while she worked. The alien administrators had not been happy about this change, but they had agreed to let Katie stay. "Remember what we talked about," Amanda said softly. "The aliens here are very different from us. They might look scary, but they are just people. Like us, they have families and jobs and feelings." Katie nodded seriously. She was a smart girl, always asking questions about everything. Amanda worried about how she would fit in at a place designed for alien adults. The Institute was famous across the galaxy for its advanced research. The smartest beings from dozens of different worlds came here to study and learn. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Amanda gathered their bags while Katie pressed, her nose against the window, trying to see the aliens walking around outside. The door opened with a hiss, and they stepped into the docking bay. The first thing Amanda noticed was the smell. It was not bad, just different, like metal and flowers mixed together. The air felt thick and warm, and she could hear strange humming. Sounds coming from machines she could not identify. "Dr. Rodriguez," a voice spoke behind them. Amanda turned and saw her first Zephyrian. The being was tall, maybe 7 feet, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. It had 4 arms and a head that was larger than a human head. 2 large eyes, completely black, looked down at her. "I am Administrator Kexler. Welcome to our institute." Amanda tried not to stare. She had seen pictures of Zephyrians before, but meeting one in person was different. The alien's voice was pleasant, though it had a musical quality that made each word sound like it was being sung. "Thank you," Amanda said. "This is my daughter, Katie." Administrator Kexler looked down at Katie with what might have been curiosity. Katie looked back without fear, studying the alien's face with the same interest she used to examine insects in their backyard. "The child will stay in the residential section," Kexler said. "She must not interfere with Institute operations. Our researchers work on projects of great importance. We cannot have disruptions." "I understand," Amanda replied, though she felt a flash of anger at the way the alien talked about Katie like she was not there. "Katie is very well behaved." Kexler made a sound that might have been doubt. "Follow me. I will show you to your quarters." They walked through corridors that curved and twisted in ways that made no sense to Amanda. The walls were covered with moving patterns of light that seemed to respond to their footsteps. Other aliens moved past them, and Amanda tried not to stare at their strange appearances. She saw beings with crystal-like skin, others that looked like walking trees, and some that seemed to be made of liquid that held a shape. Katie's head turned back and forth as she tried to see everything at once. She was not scared, just curious. Amanda felt proud of her daughter's bravery. The Institute has been operating for over 2,000 years. Kexler explained as they walked. "We have researchers from 47 different species. Our work covers all areas of science, from the very small to the very large." They passed through a large room filled with floating screens, showing complex equations and strange symbols. Aliens sat at desks that seemed to be made of light, working on problems that made Amanda's head hurt just looking at them. "This is the Mathematics Department," Kexler said. "Professor Zixthara runs this section. She is one of our most brilliant researchers. Her work on dimensional theory has changed how we understand space itself." Amanda saw a Zephyrian sitting at the center of the room. This one was smaller than Kexler, with darker skin and what looked like jewels embedded in her forehead. The professor was surrounded by holographic displays, showing geometric shapes that moved and changed as she worked. "She looks busy," Amanda said. "Professor Zixthara is always busy," Kexler replied. "She has been working on the same problem for 6 months now. It is a puzzle of her own creation, designed to test the limits of mathematical thinking. So far, no one has been able to solve it." Katie tugged on Amanda's sleeve. "What kind of puzzle?" Kexler looked down at Katie with surprise, as if he had forgotten she could talk. "It is far too complex for a human child to understand. Even our graduate students struggle with such work." Katie's eyes narrowed slightly. Amanda recognized that look. It was the same expression Katie got when someone told her she was too young to understand something. Usually, it meant Katie was about to prove them wrong. They continued walking until they reached a section of the station that looked more normal. The walls here were painted in soft colors, and the lighting was dimmer and warmer. Amanda felt some of her tension fade away. "The residential area," Kexler explained. "We modified it for human comfort. Your quarters are here." He led them to a door that opened when they approached. Inside was a small apartment with 2 rooms. The furniture looked almost human, though everything was slightly too big and the wrong color. "Your work begins tomorrow," Kexler told Amanda. "Dr. Velteran will show you to the biology labs. The child may explore the residential areas, but she must stay away from the research sections." After the administrator left, Amanda and Katie unpacked their belongings. Katie bounced on her new bed and declared it weird but okay. They ate dinner from packages that Kexler had provided. The food tasted like chicken but looked like purple soup. "What do you think so far?" Amanda asked as they got ready for bed. "It's cool," Katie said, "but I don't think they like kids very much." Amanda laughed. "They're just not used to having children around. You'll need to be extra good while we're here." "I'm always good," Katie protested, though she was smiling Dot. As Amanda tucked her daughter into bed, she wondered what tomorrow would bring. She was excited to start her research, but worried about keeping Katie entertained and out of trouble. The Institute was full of dangerous equipment and aliens, who clearly did not want a human child running around Dot. She had no idea that by the end of the week, those same aliens would be fighting over who got to work with Katie next. She could not imagine that her 8-year-old daughter would soon be solving problems that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds. All Amanda knew was that they were far from home, in a place full of wonders and dangers, and she had to keep her family safe while trying to make the best impression possible on their alien hosts. The lights in the residential section dimmed automatically, and Amanda fell asleep listening to the strange humming sounds of the space station around them. Katie woke up early the next morning. The space station made different sounds at night than during the day, and the strange humming had kept her awake for a while. But now she felt excited and ready to explore. Her mom was still sleeping, so Katie got dressed quietly and slipped out of their apartment. The residential area was empty except for a few cleaning robots that moved silently along the walls. Katie had promised to stay in the safe areas, but she was curious about everything. She walked down the hallway, looking at the moving lights on the walls and wondering how they worked. She found a door that was different from the others. It was bigger and had symbols carved into it that seemed to glow. When she got close, the door opened by itself. Katie looked around to see if anyone was watching, then stepped through. The room beyond was amazing. It was huge, with a ceiling so high she could barely see it. Floating screens filled the air, showing pictures and numbers that moved and changed. The screens were all different colors, blue and green, and purple and gold. Some showed shapes that looked like flowers. Others had lines that twisted like snakes. Katie had never seen anything so beautiful. She walked into the room, her mouth open in wonder. The screens moved as she passed them, like they were alive, and watching her dot at the center of the room sat Professor Zixthara. The alien woman had her back to Katie and was working at a desk made of light. Her 4 arms moved quickly, touching different screens and making the pictures change. She was making soft humming sounds as she worked, like she was singing to herself. Katie tried to walk quietly, but her shoes made small clicking sounds on the smooth floor. Professor Zixthara's head turned, and her large black eyes focused on Katie. "What are you doing here?" the professor asked. Her voice was sharp, not friendly like Administrator Kexler had been. "This is a restricted area. Children are not allowed." "I'm sorry," Katie said. "The door opened by itself. I was just looking." Professor Zixthara stood up. She was not as tall as Kexler, but she still looked very big to Katie. The jewels in her forehead caught the light from the floating screens. "You must leave immediately," the professor said. "This equipment is very dangerous. You could hurt yourself or damage important work." Katie nodded and started to turn away. But as she moved, one of the floating screens caught her attention. It showed a picture that looked like a puzzle, with colored shapes that fit together in pattern. The shapes were moving slowly, trying to find the right places. "What is that?" Katie asked, pointing at the screen. Professor Zixthara looked annoyed. "It is a mathematical sequence problem, very advanced. You would not understand. It looks like the puzzles in my coloring books." Katie said, "Except these pieces are moving." The professor made a sound that might have been laughter, but not the happy kind. "This is not a coloring book, child. This is a complex problem in dimensional mathematics. It requires years of study to even begin to understand." Katie moved closer to the screen. The colored shapes were trying to fit together, but they kept moving to the wrong places. She could see the pattern they were supposed to make, even though the shapes kept changing size and color. "Can I touch it?" Katie asked. "Absolutely not," Professor Zixthara said. "You could destroy weeks of work." But Katie was already reaching toward the screen. When her finger touched it, the shapes responded. She gently moved one of the pieces, a blue rectangle that was trying to fit into a space that was too small. She turned it and stretched it, and suddenly it clicked into place. Professor Zixthara stared. "How did you do that?" Katie shrugged. "It wanted to go there. I could see it." She touched another piece, a green circle that was spinning too fast. Katie slowed it down and moved it to a different part of the pattern. It fit perfectly, and suddenly a whole section of the puzzle began to make sense. The professor's 4 arms hung at her sides. She was watching Katie with an expression that might have been shock. "That piece has been in the wrong position for 3 weeks. My graduate students could not figure out where it belonged." Katie was not really listening. She was focused on the puzzle now, seeing how all the pieces wanted to connect. She moved her hands across the screen, touching different shapes and guiding them to their proper places. Some pieces needed to be turned, others needed to change color, and a few needed to become different shapes entirely. The professor sat down heavily in her chair. "This is impossible," she whispered. Katie heard her this time. What's impossible? You are solving a problem that was designed to be unsolvable, Professor Zixthara said. Her voice sounded strange, like she was talking in her sleep. I created this sequence to test the absolute limits of pattern recognition. It should take months of careful analysis. But it's not that hard, Katie said. She moved 3 more pieces. And suddenly, a large section of the puzzle lit up with golden light. You just have to see what the picture wants to be. Professor Zixthara stood up again and moved closer to Katie. What do you mean? What the picture wants to be? Katie tried to think of how to explain it, like when I draw. Sometimes I start with one thing, but then the picture tells me it wants to be something else, so I change it. These shapes are telling me where they want to go. The professor's eyes were very wide now. You are treating a mathematical equation like it has feelings. Everything has feelings, Katie said matter-of-factly. She touched another part of the screen, and more pieces began falling into place. My mom says even rocks have feelings, but they're just very quiet. Professor Zixthara made a choking sound. Katie glanced at her, worried that the alien was sick. Are you okay? Katie asked. I am fine, the professor said, though her voice sounded weird. Please, continue with what you are doing. Katie turned back to the puzzle. There were only a few pieces left now, and she could see exactly where they needed to go. She moved them quickly, her small hands dancing across the screen. The shapes responded to her touch like they were happy to finally be in the right places. With a soft chime, the puzzle completed itself. The screen filled with beautiful golden light, and symbols appeared that Katie could not read. But she could tell from the way the light pulsed that the puzzle was happy to be finished. Done, Katie said, stepping back from the screen. Professor Zixthara was staring at the completed puzzle like she had never seen it before. She touched one of her own screens, and numbers began appearing in the air around them. 17 minutes, the professor said in a whisper. You solved it in 17 minutes. Was that fast? Katie asked. The professor laughed, but it sounded more like crying. Fast? Child, you just accomplished something that should have taken a team of experts 6 months to complete. And you did it by treating mathematics like art. Katie did not understand why the professor seemed so upset. Should I not have touched it? No, Professor Zixthara said quickly. You should have touched it. I am just surprised. Very surprised. She moved to another screen and began typing rapidly with all 4 hands. What is your name, child? Katie Rodriguez. My mom is Dr. Amanda Rodriguez. She's here to study biology. Katie Rodriguez, the professor repeated, like she was trying to memorize it. How old are you, Katie? 8. I'll be 9 next month. Professor Zixthara stopped typing and looked at Katie again. 8 years old, she said to herself. An 8-year-old human child just solved the Nexus sequence. Is that what it was called? Katie asked. I liked it. Do you have more puzzles like that? The professor's laugh sounded more normal now. Oh, Katie Rodriguez, I think I have many puzzles that would interest you. But first, I must ask you a very important question. Okay. Would you like to see some really difficult puzzles? Katie's eyes lit up. Yes, please. Professor Zixthara began pulling up new screens, each one showing a different type of puzzle. Katie clapped her hands together with excitement. She had a feeling this was going to be the best day ever. Professor Zixthara could not stop staring at the completed puzzle on her screen. She had worked on the Nexus sequence for months, and her best students had spent weeks just trying to understand the basic concepts. Now an 8-year-old human child had solved it in less than 20 minutes. Katie, the professor said slowly, I want you to try something else, something a little more challenging. Katie bounced on her toes with excitement. Okay, what kind of puzzle is it? Professor Zixthara pulled up a new screen. This one showed a three-dimensional cube that was constantly changing shape. Different colored sections moved in and out of the cube, and mathematical symbols floated around it like tiny planets. This is called the temporal fold problem, the professor explained. It involves understanding how space and time work together. It requires knowledge of advanced physics and mathematics. Katie tilted her head as she studied the floating cube. It looks like it's trying to fold itself into a flower. A flower? Professor Zixthara blinked her large black eyes. How do you see a flower? Watch, Katie said. She reached toward the screen and began moving the colored sections. See how this part wants to curve, and this section wants to spiral? If you let them do what they want, they make petals. The professor watched in amazement as Katie's hands moved across the screen. The cube began to change, its sharp edges becoming smooth curves. The mathematical symbols started moving in patterns that looked almost like music. Impossible, Professor, Zixthara whispered. You are treating a temporal equation like organic growth. What's temporal mean? Katie asked, still working on the puzzle. It means time, the professor said. This puzzle is about how time moves and bends. Oh, Katie said, time is like water. It flows around things, but sometimes it makes whirlpools. Professor Zixthara's jeweled forehead began to glow brighter. This was a sign of extreme emotional excitement in Zephyrians. Katie, you just described temporal dynamics in a way that took our scientists centuries to understand. Katie finished moving the last section of the cube. The shape completed its transformation into something that did indeed look like a flower made of light and mathematics. The screen chimed softly, and new symbols appeared. Another one solved, Katie said happily. Do you have any more? Before Professor Zixthara could answer, the laboratory door opened. Another alien entered, this one completely different from the Zephyrians. The newcomer looked like it was made of living crystal, with a body that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Zixthara, the crystal being said in a voice like wind chimes. I felt unusual energy readings from your laboratory. Is everything functioning properly? Dr. Velteran, Professor Zixthara said, you need to see this. This human child has just solved two of our most complex puzzles. Dr. Velteran's crystal body shifted colors from blue to yellow, which Katie would later learn meant surprise. A human child? That seems unlikely. Show her, Katie, Professor Zixthara said gently. Katie looked at the new alien with curiosity. Are you made of rock candy? Dr. Velteran made a sound like tiny bells ringing, which was crystal being laughter. I am made of living silicon, child. I am Dr. Velteran, and I study quantum mechanics. What's quantum mechanics? Katie asked. It is the study of very, very small things, Dr. Velteran explained. Things so small you cannot see them, but they control how everything works. Professor Zixthara pulled up another screen. Velteran, show Katie your particle alignment problem, the one you have been working on for 2 months. Dr. Velteran's crystal body flickered with different colors. That problem is extremely complex. It requires understanding of subatomic behavior. Just show her, Professor Zixthara insisted. Doctor Velteran touched a control panel, and a new screen appeared. This one showed thousands of tiny dots moving in chaotic patterns. They were different colors and sizes, bouncing off each other like marbles in a bag. These represent quantum particles, Dr. Velteran explained to Katie. I need to arrange them in a specific pattern, but they keep moving and changing. It is like trying to organize a rainstorm. Katie studied the screen for a moment. They look like they're dancing, but they're not dancing together. They need music. Music? Dr. Velteran's colors shifted to orange, which meant confusion. Katie began touching the screen, but instead of moving the particles directly, she started creating wave patterns. The particles began to respond to the waves, their chaotic movement, slowly becoming more organized. She is creating harmonic frequencies, Dr. Velteran said in amazement. She is making the particles dance to a rhythm. Exactly, Katie said, concentrating on the screen. Everything likes to dance. You just have to find the right music. She continued creating wave patterns, each one different from the last. The particles began to move in beautiful spirals and loops, their random motion becoming an elegant ballet. Within minutes, they had arranged themselves in the exact pattern Dr. Velteran had been trying to achieve. The crystal being's body turned bright gold, which meant extreme excitement. Impossible. She solved it using harmonic resonance. That approach never occurred to me. What is happening here? Another voice asked. A third alien had entered the laboratory. This one was tall and green, with skin that looked wet and smooth. It had large eyes and fins along its arms. Professor Quinthus, Dr. Velteran said, you must see this. This human child is solving our most difficult problems. Professor Quinthus was an amphibious being who specialized in temporal mathematics. A human child? How old? 8, Katie said, looking up from the screen. Are you a fish person? I am from an aquatic world, Professor Quinthus said with amusement. We evolved in deep oceans. And you are the child who is surprising my colleagues? I guess so, Katie said. I just like puzzles. Professor Quinthus moved closer to the screens. Show me what she has accomplished. Professor Zixthara quickly explained about the nexus sequence and the temporal fold problem. Dr. Velteran demonstrated how Katie had solved the particle alignment using harmonic patterns. Fascinating, Professor Quinthus said. Child, May, I show you something? Okay. Katie said. Professor Quinthus created a new screen that showed what looked like a river flowing through space. But the river was made of numbers and symbols instead of water. This represents the flow of time itself, the amphibious professor explained. I am trying to understand how time moves differently in different parts of the universe. Katie watched. The flowing river of numbers. It's like the stream behind my house, she said. It goes fast in some places and slow in others. And sometimes it makes little whirlpools. Yes, Professor Quinthus said, excitement growing in his voice. Exactly. Like that. But how do you predict where the whirlpools will form? Katie studied the screen for a moment. Then she began touching points along the flowing river. You look for the rocks, she said. The water always swirls around rocks. See? Here and over there. She pointed to places in the mathematical stream where the numbers were denser. Professor Quinthus watched as Katie identified every location where temporal anomalies occurred. She is right, the professor said in wonder. Every point she identified matches our observational data. But she saw the pattern in seconds, not months. By now, word was spreading through the institute. Other researchers began arriving at the laboratory. They came from different departments and different worlds, all curious about the human child, who was solving impossible problems. Katie found herself surrounded by aliens of all shapes and sizes. There were beings made of energy, creatures that looked like walking plants, and others that seemed to be made of liquid metal. All of them were staring at her with expressions of amazement. What is her secret? One of them asked. She treats mathematics like art, Professor Zixthara said. She sees patterns as living things. She uses intuition instead of logic, Dr. Velteran added. She understands that everything in the universe is connected, Professor Quinthus concluded. Katie looked around at all the alien faces watching her. She felt a little overwhelmed by all the attention. I just think the puzzles are pretty, she said quietly. The aliens began talking among themselves in excited voices. Katie could not understand most of what they were saying, but she could tell. They were arguing about something. What are they talking about? Katie asked Professor Zixthara. They are debating whether you are really only 8 years old, the professor said with amusement. Some of them think you must be a disguised adult. Genius, Katie giggled. I'm really 8. I have a birthday cake picture from last month if you want to see it. Professor Zixthara's jeweled forehead glowed brighter. I believe you, Katie, but you must understand, what you have done today is extraordinary. You have solved problems that have puzzled the greatest minds in the galaxy. Katie shrugged. They were fun puzzles. Do you have any more? The alien professors stood in a circle around Katie, whispering among themselves in their different languages. Katie could not understand the words, but she could tell they were excited about something. Their body language was the same as when her teacher got excited about a new lesson plan. Professor Zixthara raised one of her 4 hands to get everyone's attention. Colleagues, she said, I believe we need to test the limits of Katie's abilities. Dr. Velteran's crystal body flashed. Bright red. Are you thinking what I think you are thinking? The Nexus Paradox, Professor Quintus said in a hushed voice. But that is impossible. Even we cannot solve it. Katie looked back and forth between the aliens. What's the Nexus Paradox? Professor Zixthara knelt down so she was at Katie's eye level. Her large black eyes were serious. Katie, the Nexus Paradox is the most difficult puzzle anyone has ever created. It is so hard that we designed it to be unsolvable. Why would you make a puzzle that can't be solved? Katie asked. That doesn't sound fun. We created it to test the absolute limits of intelligence, Dr. Velteran explained. It was meant to show us the edge of what any mind could achieve. Professor Quintus moved closer. Teams of the smartest beings in the galaxy have worked on it for years. No one has ever come close to solving it. Katie tilted her head. But if no one can solve it, how do you know it's really a puzzle? Maybe it's just broken. The aliens looked at each other with surprise. None of them had ever thought of the Nexus Paradox as possibly being broken. It is not broken, Professor Zixthara said carefully. It is mathematically perfect. Every equation balances. Every logical step is correct. It simply requires a level of understanding that may not exist. Can I see it? Katie asked. The professors hesitated. Administrator Kexler spoke up from the back of the group. He had arrived a few minutes earlier and had been watching quietly. Perhaps this is not wise, Kexler said. The child has already accomplished remarkable things today. We should not risk overwhelming her with something impossible. I won't get overwhelmed, Katie said. I promise. I just want to look at it. Professor Zixthara studied Katie's face for a long moment. Very well. But Katie, you must understand that this puzzle has frustrated the greatest minds in the galaxy. Do not feel bad if you cannot solve it. Okay, Katie agreed. Professor Zixthara moved to the center of the laboratory and began working at her light desk. The screens around them went dark, and then a new display appeared. This one was different from all the others Katie had seen. The Nexus Paradox filled the entire room. It was not just on screens, but projected into the air itself. Mathematical equations floated like clouds. Geometric shapes twisted through dimensions that Katie's eyes could barely follow. Colors that did not exist on Earth painted patterns across space. The whole thing moved and breathed like a living creature. Katie's mouth fell open. Wow! The Nexus Paradox combines every form of advanced mathematics, Professor Zixthara explained. Quantum mechanics, temporal theory, dimensional folding, harmonic resonance, probability matrices, and forms of logic that have no names. Katie walked slowly around the projection, studying it from different angles. The other aliens watched her carefully, looking for any sign that she was confused or frightened. It's beautiful, Katie said softly. It looks like a storm made of rainbows. Dr. Velteron's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. Beautiful, yes. But can you understand what it is asking? Katie continued to circle the projection. It's asking a question about everything. What do you mean? Professor Quintus asked. Like when my teacher asks us to write about our summer vacation, but she really wants to know if we learned anything new, Katie explained. This puzzle is asking if we understand how everything in the universe fits together. The aliens exchanged glances. Katie's simple explanation was surprisingly accurate. That is correct, Professor Zixthara said. The Nexus Paradox asks us to demonstrate complete understanding of universal principles. Katie nodded and kept studying the floating mathematics. She reached out slowly and touched one of the equations. It responded to her touch, glowing brighter and shifting position slightly. The problem is that it's trying too hard, Katie said. What do you mean? Administrator Kexler asked. It's like when I tried to draw the perfect picture, Katie explained. I put in too many details and it gets messy. This puzzle has too many parts that don't need to be there. She touched another section of the projection. See this part here? It's doing the same job as that part over there. You only need one of them. Professor Zixthara's jeweled forehead began glowing so brightly that other aliens had to shield their eyes. She is identifying redundancies in the base structure. How is that possible? Katie was not listening to the professor. She was focused on the puzzle now, moving around it and touching different sections. Each time she touched something, it would glow and shift. Some parts grew larger, while others became smaller. Some sections disappeared entirely. Katie, Dr. Velteron said nervously, what are you doing? I'm cleaning it up, Katie said, still working. It's like my room when it gets too messy. You have to put away the things you don't need so you can see the things you do need. She continued to work, moving through the projection like she was reorganizing a toy box. The aliens watched in growing amazement as the incredibly complex Nexus Paradox began to simplify. She is reducing the equation to its essential components, Professor Quintus whispered. But that should be impossible. The redundancies were built into the structure to prevent exactly this kind of simplification. Katie paused in her work. That's the problem. You made it complicated on purpose, but math doesn't want to be complicated. Math wants to be simple and pretty. She touched a large section of floating equations. This whole part is just asking what 1 + 1 equals. But it's using really big words to ask it. The section she had touched collapsed into a simple symbol that glowed with soft light. 1 + 1 = 2, Katie said, touching the symbol. Easy. The symbol pulsed and connected to other parts of the puzzle. Suddenly, a whole chain reaction began. Sections that had seemed unrelated started linking together. Complex equations simplified into basic arithmetic. Impossible geometric shapes folded into familiar patterns. The aliens stood frozen, watching their impossible puzzle transform before their eyes. She is solving it, Administrator Kexlar said in a voice filled with disbelief. Katie worked faster. Now, seeing how all the pieces wanted to connect. She moved through the projection like a dancer, her hands touching and guiding the mathematics into its proper form. It's not a puzzle about how smart we are, Katie said as she worked. It's a puzzle about how simple everything really is. She touched the final section, a swirling mass of equations that had resisted all previous attempts at solution. Under her touch, it unfolded like a flower blooming. The entire Nexus Paradox collapsed into a single, beautiful equation that floated in the center of the room. It was simple enough that even Katie could read it, even though it described the fundamental nature of reality itself. The laboratory fell completely silent. The alien professor stared at the simple equation with expressions of shock and wonder. 37 minutes, Professor Zixthara said finally. She solved the Nexus paradox in 37 minutes. Katie stepped back from the floating equation and smiled. That was fun. It was like solving a riddle. The answer was hiding inside all those big words, but it was really simple. Dr. Velteron's crystal body had turned completely white, which meant his mind was overwhelmed. Simple, he repeated. She calls the ultimate expression of cosmic truth simple. Because it is simple, Katie said. Everything important is simple. Like how my mom always says the most important things are that she loves me and I love her. That's simple, but it's also the most important thing in the world. Administrator Kexler was staring at Katie like he had never seen her before. Child, do you understand what you have just accomplished? Katie shrugged. I solved a puzzle. Can we show my mom? She likes it when I solve puzzles. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that might have been panic. They had just witnessed something that would change everything they thought. They knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself, and the little human girl who had done it just wanted to show her mother. The emergency faculty meeting was called 30 minutes after Katie solved the Nexus paradox. Every professor, researcher, and administrator on the space station crowded into the main conference room. The air buzzed with excited conversations. In dozens of different alien languages, Katie sat in a chair that was too big for her, swinging her legs back and forth. Her mother, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, sat beside her looking confused and worried. Amanda had been pulled out of her first day in the biology lab with very little explanation. Mom, are you mad at me? Katie asked quietly. I'm not mad, sweetheart, Amanda said, putting her arm around Katie. I just don't understand what's happening. They keep saying you solved some impossible puzzle, but they won't explain what that means. Administrator Kexler stood at the front of the room. He looked tired and stressed. His usually smooth blue-gray skin had developed wrinkles that Katie had not seen before. Colleagues, Kexler said, we are here to discuss the events of this morning. As you all know by now, the human child Katie Rodriguez has accomplished something unprecedented in the history of this institute. A tall alien with purple skin and 6 arms raised one hand. Is it confirmed? Did she really solve the Nexus paradox? Professor Zixthara stood up. Her jeweled forehead was still glowing brightly. I verified the solution 3 times. Dr. Velteron and Professor Quinthus confirmed my results. The Nexus paradox has been solved. The room erupted in noise. Aliens began talking loudly in their native languages, some sounding excited, others sounding upset or confused. Katie tugged on her mother's sleeve. What's a Nexus paradox? Amanda looked around the room helplessly. I don't know, honey, but it sounds important. Dr. Velteron's crystal body flashed multiple colors as he stood up. The implications are staggering, he said. We designed the Nexus paradox to be impossible. It was meant to represent the absolute limits of intelligence. If it can be solved, then we must reconsider everything we know about consciousness and understanding. An alien that looked like a walking tree rustled its leaf-covered branches. Perhaps the puzzle was flawed from the beginning. No, Professor Quinthus said firmly. I helped create the Nexus paradox. The mathematics are perfect. The logic is flawless. Katie did not find an error in our work. She found a completely different way of thinking about the problem. Katie raised her hand like she was in school. The room gradually became quiet as the aliens noticed her. Yes, Katie? Administrator. Kexler said, Can I ask a question? Katie said, Of course. Why is everyone so upset? I thought you would be happy that the puzzle got solved. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that ranged from amusement to bewilderment. Administrator Kexler sat down heavily in his chair. Katie, he said, we are not upset. We are amazed. and perhaps a little frightened. Frightened of me? Katie asked. I'm just a kid. Professor Zixthara moved closer to Katie's chair. We are not frightened of you personally, Katie. We are frightened of what your abilities mean for our understanding of intelligence. I don't understand, Katie said. Dr. Velteron's crystal body turned a gentle blue color. Katie, for thousands of years, we have believed that intelligence grows slowly. We thought that to understand complex problems, you needed years of study and training. We thought that wisdom came only with age and experience. But you showed us that this might not be true, Professor Quintus added. You solved our most difficult problems using intuition and creativity instead of logic and analysis. Katie thought about this for a moment. But everyone knows different things. I can't drive a car, or do my mom's job, or pay taxes. I just like puzzles. Yes, said a small alien with silver skin, but the puzzles you solved are not ordinary puzzles. They represent fundamental questions about how the universe works. Amanda spoke up for the first time. Excuse me, but could someone please explain what my daughter actually did, in terms I can understand? Administrator Kexler nodded. Dr. Rodriguez, your daughter solved 3 problems that have stumped our greatest minds for months or years. The final problem, the Nexus Paradox, was designed to be theoretically impossible. It was created to test the absolute limits of what any intelligence could achieve. And Katie solved it in 37 minutes, Professor Zixthara added. Amanda stared at her daughter. Katie, is this true? Katie nodded. They were really pretty puzzles, Mom, like the hardest coloring books ever. An alien with tentacles instead of arms wiggled nervously. The question now is what we do with this information. Do we study the child? Do we try to understand how her mind works? Absolutely not, Amanda said firmly. Katie is not a laboratory. Experiment. She's my daughter. Of course, Administrator Kexler said quickly. We would never suggest anything harmful to Katie. But Dr. Rodriguez, you must understand the significance of what has happened. Your daughter may represent a new type of intelligence that could revolutionize science across the galaxy. Katie looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at her. She felt uncomfortable with so much attention. I just want to keep doing puzzles, Katie said quietly. And I want to stay with my mom. Professor Zixthara knelt down beside Katie's chair. Katie, would you like to be my special assistant? You could help me with my research, and I could show you more puzzles. But only if you want to, and only if your mother agrees. Katie's eyes lit up. Really? I could help with real research? You would be the youngest researcher in the history of the Institute, Dr. Velteron said. Perhaps the youngest researcher in galactic history. Amanda looked uncertain. I don't know. Katie is just a child. She should be playing and learning normal things. Mom, Katie said, solving puzzles is playing for me. And now I am learning. I'm learning about math and space and how smart aliens think. Professor Quintus stepped forward. Dr. Rodriguez, we propose a compromise. Katie could work with us for a few hours each day, treating it as an advanced form of play. The rest of the time, she would be a normal child, doing normal child activities. And what would Katie get out of this arrangement? Amanda asked. Knowledge, Professor Zixthara said. Access to the greatest collection of scientific puzzles and problems in the galaxy. And the chance to help us understand things we have never understood before. Katie tugged on her mother's sleeve again. Please, Mom? I promise I'll still do my regular schoolwork, too. Amanda looked at her daughter's eager face, then at the aliens surrounding them. If Katie wants to do this, and if you promise she will not be harmed or pressured, then I suppose we could try it. The room filled with excited chatter again. Many of the aliens seemed relieved that they would have the chance to work with Katie and learn from her unique approach to problem-solving. Administrator Kexler stood up again. Then it is settled. We will establish a new research program with Katie as our special consultant. Dr. Rodriguez, your position here will be extended indefinitely. We have much to learn from both of you. Katie clapped her hands together. This is going to be so much fun. Professor Zixthara's jeweled forehead glowed with what Katie was beginning to recognize as happiness. Yes, Katie, I believe it will be. As the meeting ended and the aliens began filing out of the room, Katie heard them talking excitedly about new experiments and research projects. She heard words like revolutionary and paradigm shift and fundamental breakthrough. Katie did not understand all those big words, but she understood that something important had changed. The aliens were looking at her differently now, not as a small human child who was in the way, but as someone who could help them learn new things. Are you happy, sweetheart? Amanda asked as they walked back to their quarters. Very happy, Katie said. I like it here. The aliens are nice, and they have the best puzzles ever. Amanda smiled and squeezed Katie's hand. Just promise me you'll still be my little girl, even if you're also a galactic research consultant. I promise, Mom, Katie said. But can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think they have any puzzles about dinosaurs? Because I really like dinosaurs, and it would be cool to solve a dinosaur puzzle in space. Amanda laughed. I'm sure if they don't have dinosaur puzzles, they'll make some just for you. Katie grinned. This is definitely going to be the best job ever. As they walked through the corridors of the space station, Katie began planning all the puzzles she wanted to try next. She had no idea that news of her achievements would soon spread across the galaxy, or that scientists from dozens of worlds would come to study her unique approach to problem solving. All Katie knew was that she had found a place where her love of puzzles was not just accepted but celebrated. And that was exactly what she had always wanted.